A single father buys a forgotten ranch for $10, only to hear whispers from a locked room and discover a woman who never truly left. Now, before we begin, if the stories of quiet kindness and second chances stir something quiet in you, subscribe for more tales of healing and the human heart feeling back to life. The wind curled to the broken slats of the barn like something alive, soft and circling, almost like breath. Jack Holloway stood beside the rusty gate, keys heavy in his pocket, staring at what $10 and a pile of misplaced hope had bought him. A ranch that had once belonged to someone who'd left in a hurry, someone who hadn't bothered to lock everything behind them, except one door. Ellie, his daughter, ran ahead of him through the dry grass. She wore her purple jacket tied around her waist, arms swinging, hair catching gold in the setting sun. 8 years old and somehow steadier than he felt. Her laugh bounced off the fence post like a song this place had forgotten how to hum. "It smells weird," she said when they reached the porch. She held her nose but grinned, like wet dust and old secrets. Jack smiled in spite of himself. That's about right. The front door didn't creak when he pushed it open. It sighed, as if grateful someone had finally come back. The air inside was cold, stale in the way a closed-off memory is. Dust floated in pale beams from the cracked windows. A pair of boots sat by the door untouched, as though their owner might walk back in any minute and slide them on. The house wasn't gutted or stripped like he'd feared. It was preserved, left behind like a thought mid-sentence. They walked through the rooms in silence. Kitchen, parlor, a narrow hallway lined with black and white photos curling at the edges. Jack paused at a frame-holding couple, young, sun-drenched, laughing in front of the same porch they'd just crossed. He looked away before he noticed too much. Upstairs, the hallway ended with a closed door. It was the only one in the house that didn't yield to the twist of a knob. He tried gently, then pressed harder. It didn't budge. Maybe it's a secret library, Ellie offered, standing beside him now. Or a witch's room, with a cauldron and a cat that talks. Or someone's storage closet, Jack said, kneeling to examine the old brass knob. It had no keyhole, just a smooth face worn by time and weather. Looks like it's been shut a long time. He could have forced it. He could have gotten his tools from the truck and wrenched it open with a crowbar and an ounce of impatience. But something about the door asked him not to. Ellie tilted her head, listening. "Did you hear that?" Jack stood still. "Hear what?" She waited. The house was silent. "Never mind," she said. "Probably just the wind in the walls." They picked rooms to sleep in. Ellie claimed the one with faded blue wallpaper and a view of the hills, while Jack took the one nearest the stairs. He pulled out their sleeping bags and unpacked a single box of dishes. It would take weeks to make this house feel like a home, and maybe it never would, but they were here, and they were trying. That night, after Ellie had fallen asleep curled up beside her stuffed fox, Jack sat on the porch with a blanket over his shoulders and an ache in his chest. The stars were brutal out here, clear and cold and too many to count. He sipped from a chipped mug of tea and stared into the dark, the silence pressing around him, but not unkindly, just enough to make him feel small, just enough to remind him that beginnings often look like endings at first. He went inside when the wind picked up. He passed the upstairs hallway, without meaning to stop, but did. The door at the end was closed as ever, still smooth, still locked. Then he heard it, faint, softer than breath. A whisper. Jack froze. His mug tilted slightly in his hand, cooling tea brushing the rim. He listened. Nothing. He took a step closer. The floorboard creaked gently beneath his foot. No reaction from the door. Maybe it was Ellie talking in her sleep. Maybe it was his own thoughts echoing too loud. Maybe the house was just settling after years of being alone. The next morning, Ellie was already drawing by the time Jack came down to make breakfast. She found a stub of charcoal and was sketching flowers onto the dusty front window with slow, careful lines. "Those are new," she said, not looking up. "What are?" "The sounds. Last night, they weren't like the wind." Jack stirred the oatmeal. Could have been the walls expanding. Houses talk to themselves when they're this old. Ellie wrinkled her nose. They weren't talking to themselves. Someone whispered. He didn't correct her, didn't tell her she was wrong, because deep down he didn't know that she was. Later that day, while unpacking more boxes from the truck, Jack passed the hallway again. He paused outside the locked door. This time he didn't try to open it. He just stood there listening. Nothing came. He left a folded dish towel outside it anyway, without knowing why. That night it rained, a short, heavy burst that pounded on the roof and turned the dirt road into something slick and quiet. Jack read To Ellie by Flashlight, one of her favorites, about a girl who lived in a lighthouse and sent messages in bottles. Would anyone ever find her messages? Ellie asked as she burrowed under the blanket. Jack closed the book and rubbed the back of his neck. I think someone would have to, even if they were scared to open them. He met her eyes, especially then. The flashlight clicked off. The house went still again. Long after Ellie's breathing had deepened, Jack heard the whisper once more. This time it wasn't a single word. It was a hush of syllables, barely intelligible. A cadence, like someone speaking in the next room with the door mostly shut. He pressed his ear to the wood. It stopped. Jack whispered, "Hello?" Silence. But as he turned to walk back down the hallway, a soft voice, female, unmistakably adult, answered from the other side. I don't know if I remember how. Jack stood there rooted. It wasn't the voice of a ghost. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't a dream. It was someone alive. He didn't knock, didn't push. He walked away slowly, barefoot, heart thudding louder than the whisper had been. The next morning, he found something outside the locked door. A cookie, a single chocolate chip cookie, warm enough that the chips had begun to melt into the napkin. He looked down the hallway. Ellie was still asleep. The wind brushed past the windows like a lullaby, soft and strange. And from behind the door, just once more, Jack heard the whisper. One word. Fragile. Hopeful. Thanks. The kettle screamed. Jack pulled it from the stovetop before it could rattle itself to madness and poured the water into two mismatched mugs. One held a bag of peppermint tea. The other he left plain. No bag, no spoon, no sugar. Just the warmth. He set them both on a tray, added a small plate of buttered toast, then paused. He looked toward the staircase like someone expecting a verdict. Upstairs, the locked door waited. He climbed the steps quietly, tray in hand. It was early. The sky beyond the window still held the bruise of dawn, and Ellie was still tangled in sleep. The boards creaked softly beneath him. When he reached the door, he knelt and set the tray down gently, careful not to clink anything. Then, like a man lighting a candle in a chapel, he whispered, "Breakfast?" There was no reply. There never was, not immediately. But when he returned an hour later, the mug of plain water was gone. The toast was untouched. The second mug remained where he'd left it, steam-thinned and drifting. He took it downstairs and washed it anyway. That became their ritual. Every morning, a tray, 2 mugs, sometimes toast, sometimes fruit, sometimes a scrap of paper folded under a spoon. Notes he wasn't sure would be read. He never got one back. Not at first. Ellie began to leave small things, too. A sticker from her notebook, a pencil with a carved cat head, a photo of her mother smiling, windblown, standing at the edge of a lake they used to visit in Oregon. She taped that one gently to the door, right above the handle. The next morning, it was gone. In its place, tucked neatly where the mug used to be, was a single sheet of lined paper. 5 words, written in looping script. She looks like she laughed. Jack held the paper in his hand for a long time. Later that day, he folded it and placed it in his wallet, beside a receipt he couldn't bring himself to throw away, and the last picture Ellie drew at their old apartment. Stick figures holding hands beneath a tree with no leaves. That evening, Ellie sat cross-legged on the stairs near the door, humming softly as she colored. Jack worked downstairs, sanding the edges of a crooked shelf, pretending not to listen. She asked me what color the trees are. Ellie said casually over dinner. Jack looked up. "What?" She whispered it through the door. She said she couldn't remember what October looked like. Ellie picked up a spoonful of mashed potatoes. I told her they're orange and gold and red, and some trees are trying to hold on even though they're supposed to let go. Jack's hand stilled over his plate. She also asked about the horses. "There haven't been horses here in a long time," he murmured. "I told her we could fix that," Ellie said. She was serious, earnest in that way only children can be, as though everything broken can be mended if someone just cares enough. That night, Jack left a note. There used to be Mustangs out by the west fence. The kind that didn't want to be tamed. They'd come close sometimes, like they were deciding whether to trust you. They never stayed long. In the morning, the note was gone. A small dried flower had been left in its place, folded into the napkin from yesterday's tray. He recognized it, a brittle sprig of yarrow, the kind that still grew by the edge of the barn, roots deep in the clay. Jack stared at it for a long time, then placed it on the windowsill, just above the sink. Days passed like that, small exchanges, a slow dance between silence and bravery. Sometimes, Anna's whispers would come in the late hours, when the house was asleep and Jack sat with his coffee near the fireplace. He never responded out loud, only listened. She told Ellie once, in a voice barely louder than a thought, that her name was Anna. "Anna," Ellie whispered back. "That's a good name." Jack had to sit down when he heard it. Something in him let go, a rope held too tightly for too long. They didn't ask Anna questions. They didn't press her for a reason. Jack had learned. Loss teaches some things harshly, that not every door should be opened by force. That Wednesday, the clouds thickened early. Jack spent the afternoon nailing down loose shingles, watching the sky build its temper. By dusk, the first drops fell in slow, deliberate splashes against the tin roof. Ellie helped him bring in the last of firewood, hair damp, eyes wide with excitement. Thunder came next, low and heavy, like a voice muttering something angry and far away. They lit candles early. Jack brought out the old chessboard he'd found in the attic. Ellie beat him twice before yawning into her sleeve. She went to bed with her fox clutched to her chest. Jack sat by the fireplace, gaze flickering between flame and window, storm thickening outside. Then it happened, a crack of thunder sharp enough to rattle the panes. And then another sound, not wind, not storm, a cry. Jack was up the stairs in seconds, not running but close. He reached the hallway and stopped, barefoot on cold wood, staring at the door. He heard her breathing, quick, unsteady. He stepped closer. "Anna." Nothing. He knelt, hand pressed to the base of the door. "It's just thunder. Just weather. You're safe." Still no answer. "I didn't mean to scare you." And then, soft, choked, her voice. "Don't knock like that," she whispered. It sounded like him. Jack's hand froze. He didn't ask who him was. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I won't knock again." There was a pause. Then, "I didn't mean to yell. When I heard it, I thought I was back, in the other house." Jack sat there, not speaking. "I know I'm not," she added, as if convincing herself. "But storms make it feel close again." Jack leaned his shoulder gently to the door, his voice barely audible. Storms pass. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was mutual. In the morning, Ellie found him asleep at the kitchen table, empty mug beside him, a dish towel folded beneath his cheek. She laughed and poked his shoulder. "Dad, you're not a very good bed." He ruffled her hair and stood up slowly, stretching the stiffness from his limbs. Then he climbed the stairs. The tray from the night before had been brought in, but on the floor in its place was a napkin folded into a triangle. Inside it, a note. "I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was afraid you'd open the door." Jack read it 3 times. Then he smiled just slightly and wrote something back. He didn't ask for more. He only wrote, "We won't open it until you do. Promise." The note was gone the next morning. In its place was a tea bag, lavender and chamomile, and a second cup, scrubbed clean. Jack poured warm water into it and left it on the tray without a word. Downstairs, Ellie tugged at his sleeve. "She said something else," she whispered. "Last night, before the thunder." "What did she say?" "She said she doesn't know what kind of person she is anymore." Jack knelt to meet her eyes. "And what did you tell her?" Ellie shrugged. I said she's still the kind that drinks tea. Jack pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. Outside, the storm had passed. The sky was still gray, but no longer angry, just quiet now and open. Later that night, Jack sat at the fireplace again. He held his mug between both hands, heat slowly fading, and listened to the floor above creak once, then still. He didn't need a voice to know Anna was awake. Somewhere in the hush of the house, she was sitting on the other side of the door, as he was sitting by the fire, and maybe that was enough for now. Not rescue, not revelation. Just this, warmth shared across silence, one room apart. Not alone. The wind had changed again. Jack noticed it not by the way the trees shifted, but by how the silence in the house felt softer, less watchful. For weeks, the locked door felt like a wound, a quiet presence pulsing the edge of every hallway glance, every creaking floorboard. Now it felt like something healing. He didn't try to define it. He'd learned not everything demanded a name. That morning, he brought up the usual tray, 2 mugs of tea, 1 spoonful of honey, a slice of banana bread Ellie had baked, slightly sunken in the middle but sweet all the same. He placed it gently at the foot of the door. When he stood to leave, he heard it, her voice, not muffled, not cautious. "My name is Anna." He froze, hands still resting on the tray. Then he nodded once, though she couldn't see it. "I'm Jack." There was a pause. Then, quieter, like the whisper of a turning page, she said, "I know." Downstairs, Ellie squealed in delight when she saw the empty bread plate. She liked it. "She did," Jack said, smiling into his mug. That night, he found a note on the tray in soft, looping handwriting. "I used to bake. I remember the way flour sticks to your fingers and how warm a room feels when something's rising in the oven. I miss that." Jack left a reply. "There's more flour in the pantry. It's just waiting." From that day on, things changed. Gently, like the slow unfurling of petals. Anna spoke more. Quietly, often after sundown, her voice sometimes trailing into stillness mid-thought. She never explained where she'd come from or why she had sealed herself inside. But she shared pieces, laid carefully like stones across a stream. Jack never pushed. He simply sat nearby, sometimes with Ellie tucked under his arm, sometimes alone, letting her words settle around him like snowfall. "I lived here once," Anna said one evening, "before it became a place I couldn't leave." Jack waited. "I was younger. Not much, but enough to be stupid. I thought someone loved me. I thought his promises were made of brick instead of breath." She paused. "He brought me here. It wasn't his to give, but he made it feel like it was. And then he stopped pretending." Jack exhaled slowly, and when he left, Anna's voice faltered. He didn't. They sat in the silence that followed, a respectful stillness. Jack closed his eyes, letting the ache settle inside his ribs. "I'm not hiding anymore," she said at last. "I just forgot how to come out." Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. Instead, he left her another note the next morning. "There's no rush. The door opens when you do, not before." Ellie, for her part, treated Anna's presence like a growing thing. She began telling her bedtime stories of the wood, sometimes about school, sometimes made-up tales about pirate foxes and invisible birds who could only be seen in mirrors. Anna listened. Sometimes she laughed. Once she cried. Ellie slipped a pack of tissues under the door the next morning and said nothing else. That afternoon, while clearing the attic, Jack found a faded music box hidden beneath an old quilt. It was shaped like a farmhouse, its paint chipped but delicate. He turned the small brass crank. The tune was gentle, off-key from age, but haunting. Jack left it outside Anna's door that night with no note, no explanation. The next evening, they heard it playing. Ellie pressed her ear to the door wide-eyed. "It sounds like it remembers her," she whispered. The next day, a folded napkin appeared on the tray, embroidered with tiny flowers. Jack recognized the initials in the corner. H. Anna Holloway. He stared at the letters for a long time. At dinner, Ellie asked the question Jack had been holding off. "Is she going to stay forever?" Jack looked up from his plate. "Maybe. Can she come eat with us?" "Someday." Does she know about Mom? Jack hesitated. Then quietly, yes. Ellie pushed her peas around and added, I think she's sad too. Like you. Jack didn't respond. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Later that night, Jack sat in the hallway just outside Anna's door. The house was quiet. Firelight flickered from below. He didn't knock, just waited. Eventually, her voice emerged. I used to read by lantern light in this hallway. Right there. I was 14 the first time I finished a book alone. I remember the way it felt, like I had opened a window in my own mind. Jack smiled. What book? Wuthering Heights. Haunting choice. I like haunted things. Do you still? Sometimes. Her voice softened. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. Anna laughed, a sound not quite certain of itself, but real. I thought I was broken beyond repair, she said. Jack tilted his head. You're not broken. You don't know me. I know enough, he said. You whisper like someone hoping the world might whisper back. That silence again. Then, thank you. Another day passed. Then, too, Jack began repairing the front porch. Ellie planted seeds along the edge of the barn. Wildflowers, she insisted, would grow even in the hard earth. Even things with no roots could belong somewhere, she told Anna through the door. You don't need dirt to be a flower. Anna left her a book in return. The Secret Garden. Its pages were worn and underlined in places. On the inside cover was written, For the brave ones who knock gently. Ellie read the entire book aloud over the next week, chapter by chapter, sitting on the hallway floor. Jack listened from downstairs, and Anna listened from the other side of the door. The final chapter ended with Ellie whispering, You can open the garden whenever you want. That night, Jack went to bed early. Rain tapped at the windows again, softer this time, calmer. Just past midnight, he woke to a sound he couldn't place. He sat up slowly, listening. Silence. But then, something creaked. Footsteps. One. Then two. He opened his door, heart pounding. The hallway was dim. The door at the end, slightly ajar. Not wide. Just enough. He didn't move toward it. He didn't speak. He only stood there barefoot, breathing. Then, slowly, he walked back to his room and closed the door behind him. In the morning, Ellie found the tray cleaned and carefully stacked outside the door. 3 cups. Jack picked them up one by one and ran water over them in the sink, then dried them gently with the towel Anna had left behind. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Later, as he sat on the porch with his coffee, Ellie brought out a small card. She left this for me, she said. Under my pillow. Jack took it. The handwriting was the same. Soft curves. Strong lines. You make the house feel kind again. He looked up. The sky was blue. Not blinding, just open. When he glanced toward the upstairs window, he saw a curtain shift. A figure, faint behind the glass. She didn't wave. Neither did he. But something passed between them anyway. That night, Jack brought up only one tray. 3 mugs. No toast. Just warmth. The old door no longer whispered. It stood open now. Not wide, but enough to breathe. Enough to blur the line between silence and life. The knob had been replaced. Just a smooth round of polish which Jack had carved himself, warm to the touch and free of any lock. There was no longer anything to keep out. Or in. Anna came down the stairs on a morning edged in gold, barefoot and quiet. She moved with the careful grace of someone rejoining a world she had only watched from behind. Her steps made no sound on the rug, but Ellie turned anyway, smile blooming like light. You're real, she whispered. Anna nodded. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose braid, and her cardigan hung like a hug she'd forgotten how to accept. She didn't speak. She only stepped into the kitchen, sat at the table, and reached for the 3rd mug Jack had already placed beside the teapot. Jack looked up once, met her eyes, and said nothing. That was enough. The ranch didn't change overnight, but it began to feel lived in again. Curtains were washed. The piano was dusted. Ellie's toys migrated across the house in trails of scattered color. The hearth became a gathering place. Sometimes for words, sometimes just for shared quiet. Anna didn't fill the space loudly. She didn't try to reclaim the time that had passed her by. Instead, she moved gently through each day, as if relearning the shape of her own presence. She swept. She fed the barn cats. She planted sage by the back porch and read by the window with her feet tucked beneath her. Jack watched her in glances, never too long, not because he didn't want to, but because he understood the language of space. It was one she spoke fluently. They didn't talk about the years, or the man, or the way grief could lock a person behind walls no one else could see. They talked about the horses, about the way Ellie's drawings looked like wild little stories on the fridge, about how the morning light hit the eastern hill just so. Some evenings, Anna stayed out after sunset, sitting on the porch beside Jack, while Ellie read aloud from books she half memorized. They didn't always speak. The air between them was rich enough already, steeped in cinnamon tea and wood smoke, and the hush of trust not needing to announce itself. One evening, Anna looked out the field beyond the garden and said, "I used to dream about walking out that far, just putting my feet in the grass, but I was afraid the sky would swallow me." Jack handed her his mug. "The sky only swallows people who try to outrun it. You're not running anymore." She smiled, soft and unsure. "I'm still learning to stand." "You're doing it," he said, "every morning." She turned her face toward the wind, eyes half closed. "I forgot what good air feels like." He didn't say more, just sat beside her, letting the silence settle. Ellie began calling Anna her shadow sister. She'd say it with a giggle, arms around Anna's waist as they cooked, or as Anna helped her braid her hair before bed. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation. Children, Jack thought, understand healing better than grown-ups do. They don't ask for reasons. They just offer room. It was Ellie who painted the door. She spent a full weekend at it. Brush in one hand, watercolor palettes spread across the floor. She painted wildflowers first, lavender yarrow, golden poppies. Then she added stars, white and tiny, down in the upper panel like hope scattered across a midnight sky. Anna watched from the top of the stairs, hands clasped tightly, eyes stinging. When Ellie finished, she stepped back and declared, "Now it's not a locked door anymore. It's just a story door." Jack blinked back something sharp behind his eyes. Anna walked down, crouched beside the door, and placed her hand flat against the wood. "It's beautiful." Ellie grinned. "So are you." That night, they all ate together for the first time at the big oak table in the dining room. Dusted and dressed with candles, Ellie insisted on lighting herself. There was laughter, tentative at first, then real. Jack watched Anna as she passed the bread basket, her fingers brushing his for a moment. She didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. The moment passed like a core resolve. Nothing dramatic, just belonging. Later that week, a silver sedan rolled up the dirt road. Jack saw it first, out by the fence line. A woman stepped out, tall, mid-30s, short brown curls, blazer too clean for the ranch dust. She introduced herself as Leah Whitlock, a state caseworker. Jack tensed. So did Anna behind him, her breath catching before she slipped half behind the doorframe. Leah raised both hands gently. "I'm not here to take anyone. I'm here because I got a letter." Jack frowned. "A letter?" She nodded. "From Anna. Months ago. It only reached me last week. Said she was ready to be found, if someone still remember how to look." Anna stepped forward slowly. "Leah?" Leah's face crumpled. Surprise, disbelief, relief all folding together. I didn't know if." She stopped, shook her head. "You disappeared." "I needed to," Anna said. Her voice didn't shake. Leah stepped closer, eyes shining. "You're my sister. You don't have to explain." Anna nodded. She didn't cry, but her shoulders lowered just slightly, as if putting down something she'd carried too long. They talked on the porch for hours that afternoon. Ellie listened from the stairwell, eyes wide, clutching her stuffed fox. When the sun dipped low, Leah stood to go, but Anna placed a hand on her arm. "You don't have to leave," she said. "Not yet." Leah stayed the night, and the next. In time, Leah became part of the evenings, another voice in the circle of warmth by the fireplace, Another hand passing mugs. Another pair of eyes watching the sky go dark and waiting for stars. Jack and Anna didn't speak of what was happening between them, but something pulsed underneath, something quiet and steady, like the beat of wings learning they can stretch again. One night, he brought her a repaired music box. Not the old one. This one was new, found at a small shop in town. He'd swapped the melody inside. Now, when turned, it played a gentle version of Claire de Lune. Anna turned the crank, eyes bright with something unspoken. "This one's yours," he said. "Not from before. From now." She didn't answer, but she reached out, slid her hand into his, and held it. The silence between them was whole. Spring came early. The sage bloomed. The porch was swept daily. Ellie ran barefoot through the grass, laughter trailing behind her like a banner. One morning, Jack found Anna kneeling by the painted door. She was adding one last detail. A fox curled in the corner, sleeping beneath the flowers. He stood beside her, arms crossed. "That for Ellie?" Anna smiled, wiping her brush. "It's for all of us." That night, the three of them sat on the porch. Ellie had fallen asleep beside Leah inside, curled in a blanket with a book still open in her lap. Jack looked up at the stars. "You still afraid of the sky?" he asked. Anna leaned into his shoulder, her voice soft against the wind. "No, just learning how to live under it again." He turned slightly, met her eyes. They held there, not needing a question, not rushing toward anything. When he kissed her, it wasn't sudden. It was an exhale, a remembering. They didn't speak afterward, just sat there, hands clasped, the sound of wind in the grass, a night owl calling from the fence post. When they finally went inside, Anna paused by the door. She placed her palm against the smooth wood, where the lock used to be. Then she left it open behind her. Some doors don't need closing again, not after they've been opened by trust. If this story touched you, subscribe and share where you're watching from. These stories matter.